Day one, baby.
Day one.
To this day.
To this day. To this day.
To this day.
We're covering today's top boxing news. Well, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, per tweet from Michael Benson, announced Demetrius Andrade will face Dusty Hernandez Harrison in a super middleweight clash on Jacobs versus Rosario card November 27th. He said, "Is this the big fight I wanted? No. But what am I supposed to do? Sit here and keep waiting for someone to accept one of Eddie's offers?" You know, we were talking about this guy in my last upload. You know that, right?
Right.
My last video. And looking at this, I don't think this helps Demetrius Andrade's argument at all. Not one bit, not one bit. After Demetrius having expressed an aversion to fighting Liam Williams, he's taking on the lesser-known Dusty Hernandez.
This guy doesn't make it easy on himself, does he?
Demetrius Andrade is a fighter who is getting harder and harder to defend for what is missing on his resume, for what is not there. He's taken on Dusty Hernandez. Unbeaten Dusty Hernandez, 34-0 with 20 knockouts. Dusty Hernandez. But Dusty Hernandez, who hasn't fought any notoriable fighters anywhere at all. If you want me to be honest, I'm being honest. I got nothing against Dusty Hernandez, but Dusty Hernandez is an unheralded guy with 34 victories over unheralded guys. You know, in 2016, he was campaigning as a welterweight. He took a bit of a hiatus from the sport after defeating Thomas Lamana in the welterweight division. That was in September of 2016. And Dusty did not return to the ring until last year in March. When he came back as a light heavyweight. And he's been floating around super middleweight and light heavyweight ever since. It's pretty clear that Dusty, he can't make welterweight anymore. Dusty Hernandez's resume reads a lot like Steve Rolls' resume before the Golovkin fight. It reads a lot like Konstantin Ponomarev's resume before the Vorobyev fight back in 2018, to where the guy's got an unbeaten record, but that's not saying much, not when you revise this fighter's quality of competition. Hasn't faced any notoriable fighters, any solid fighters, as a welterweight, or as a light heavyweight, or as a super middleweight. That makes Demetrius Andrade's comments in reference to Liam Williams pretty hard to defend, because Demetrius Andrade expressed an aversion to locking horns with Liam Williams.
Remember?
He says fighting that guy don't do nothing for him. Well, what the hell does fighting Dusty Hernandez do for you?
Dusty Harrison.
Harrison, Hernandez? What the hell's this guy got, 2 last names?
Just call him Dusty.
The point is, you can't write off Liam Williams, who is your mandatory challenger to your world title in the middleweight division. You can't write that guy off and cast him aside as inconsequential to your career when you're facing an even lesser-known guy than that guy. Now, this card that Demetrius Andrade and Daniel Jacobs are set to be making appearances on reads a lot like a COVID card. I mean, if it's anything, it's that, because Daniel Jacobs is fighting Gabriel Rosado, and Demetrius Andrade is fighting Dusty Hernandez. Needless to say, these aren't the kind of fights you write home about.
It's a COVID card.
I mean, if it's anything, it's that. And with that in mind, I think that Matchroom, like the PBC, like Top Rank, is allowed to stage a COVID card. I'm not in a rush to dispense a whole lot of criticism, but I have to be honest that there are a lot of people out there that are growing very impatient with Demetrius Andrade, and he is a fighter, a champion, who is getting harder and harder to defend. And we talked about this in my previous video, how in some ways Demetrius Andrade is responsible for what's not on his resume. I mean, in some ways he is. There are fights that he walked away from, but just as well, there are fighters who walked away from fights with him. So if you're going to assign blame, you have to assign the blame evenly on a case-by-case basis. Better still, the average boxing fan just wants to see a good fight. They want to see good fighters in good fights. Demetrius Andrade is talked about in that respect. A crafty southpaw who's all in his prime, very statuesque, great physical dimensions for the middleweight division or the super middleweight division. But what his career is lacking is a sense of intrigue.
And this fight isn't intriguing.
It all turns into this vicious cycle that, for me at least, has grown quite tedious. I get sick of seeing guys talking to me about how Demetrius Andrade walked away from the Jermell Charlo fight all those years ago, whilst simultaneously not making any light of Jermall Charlo, Jermell's brother, having walked away from Demetrius for even more money than was on the table for Demetrius to fight Jermell. The Jermall Charlo fight was a multi-million-dollar fight. That's what was on the table that time. Those guys don't make any light of that. It is true that he walked away from Sergey Derevyanchenko, but if you're going to make light of that, why don't you make light of Gennady Golovkin not being all that interested in fighting this fighter? He's more interested in Kamil Zeramata, apparently, and I guess waiting out the Canelo Alvarez situation? There is plenty of blame to assign. There really is plenty of blame to go around. Though it's this fight we're talking about. It's this fight that brought us here. And when it comes to this fight, this is a keep busy fight.
That's what it is.
This is Demetrius Andrade dipping his toe in the pool of the super middleweight division where I've no doubts he intends to go. I don't know how long Demetrius Andrade plans on holding on to that middleweight title, that WBO middleweight title that he's supposed to defend against Liam Williams. And Liam Williams' name was mentioned in a recent report discussing this fight, though I question whether or not Demetrius Andrade will return to the middleweight division at all after this fight's outcome is decided.
There's no guarantees that he does.
I'll say this much. I'm not going to lose my mind that Demetrius Andrade is fighting this guy, because I didn't see anybody losing their minds when Liam Williams fought that Andrew Robinson guy. Guy with 4 losses, the guy he just knocked out. He was an unheralded guy the way that this guy's an unheralded guy, but that guy had 4 losses. Better still, I'm not expecting this fight to do any more for Demetrius Andrade's career than that Andrew Robinson fight did for Liam Williams' career. Ultimately, this is a COVID card, and this is a keep busy fight. No more, no less. But things have really got to pick up for Demetrius Andrade. I mean, they really do, because he's getting harder and harder to defend. Now, unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. took to Twitter to react to this announcement that Demetrius Andrade is going to be fighting Dusty Harrison, and he says, "I don't care. Andrade can find better competition than that." Shaking my head, to which WBO super middleweight champion Billy Joe Saunders replied with 2 emojis expressing agreement towards Errol Spence Jr.'s contention. And this is what I'm talking about, folks. If you're going to assign blame, then assign the blame evenly, because Billy Joe Saunders had not 1, but 2 opportunities to lock horns with Demetrius Andrade. And if those fights didn't happen, it is as a direct result of Billy Joe Saunders fucking up the first fight and walking away from the second one. That's right. We know what happened with the Flonase. Billy Joe Saunders had some kind of substance in his system that
is illegal.
Is a banned substance in this country. And, first fight gets fucked up. But the second fight, which doesn't get talked about as much, the second time out, the WBO mandated that Billy Joe Saunders challenge Demetrius Andrade for the WBO title. He could have fought the guy. He could have won his belt back. He decided not to. He decided to move up in weight and fight the even lesser-known Shafat Isufi in a fight that nobody gave a rat's ass about. The fucking nerve of this guy. Charles Adamu, Shafat Isufi, Marcelo Coceres.
But you're criticizing Demetrius Andrade.
In truth, comparatively, Billy Joe Saunders does have a better resume than Demetrius Andrade. I mean, I think he does. He gave John Ryder his first professional loss. Gary Spike O'Sullivan his first professional loss. Chris Eubank Jr. his first professional loss. He really put his skills on display against David Lemieux, who most people thought was going to knock Billy out. It's just that, well, that was a long time ago. The Andy Lee victory is also worth mentioning, but that also was a very long time ago. As of late, Billy Joe Saunders' quality of competition is no better than Demetrius Andrade.
It's really not.
Matter of fact, they both have a common opponent in Artur Akavov, with the difference being that Demetrius Andrade didn't have to apologize to the paying public after the outcome was decided. like Billy did, because Billy stunk up the joint.
Billy must have forgot about that.
Whilst reacting to this fight, I look at Billy, and I look at Demetrius, and I see two peas in a pod. Two very crafty southpaws who are very capable fighters.
They both are.
The fact of the matter is, neither one of their quality of competition has been anything to write home about. And it takes a lot of goddamn nerve for Billy Joe Saunders to sit there trying to critique who Demetrius Andrade is fighting when, hey, newsflash, he still wants to fight you.
You.
So what the hell are you so busy with that he's not fighting you?
You.
Can't say's you're too busy with Callum. Can't say's you're too busy with Caleb. Just a few days ago, Demetrius Andrade expressed a desire to move up to what would be his third weight class, where he would challenge Billy Joe Saunders for his WBO title.
I'll take that over a Liam Williams fight.
I think a fight between Demetrius and Billy makes a lot of sense because they're stablemates, they're on the same side of the street, they fight on the same platform, and let's be honest, the middleweight division doesn't seem to be offering up very much for Demetrius Andrade to do when the most interesting opponent interested in you is Liam Williams. Perhaps it is time for you to move up. But if and when Demetrius does, is Billy going to actually fight the fucking guy or what?
We'll see.
Either Deontay Wilder has just vanished from the earth and just don't fancy fighting anymore, or his advisors have done the worst contract in boxing history. I mean, this is just expired, right? We're in a global pandemic. I mean, you know, how can you? I don't know. So, are you telling me that you've done a contract that doesn't protect yourself against a force majeure, and you no longer have a rematch clause? It's just expired. I don't believe that Shelley Finkel and the team would have done that. But then Aram and these guys are just goading them, saying, "Bye, it's expired." And Shelley's coming out going, "Oh no, I hope we can do the fight." Well, are you coming out and protect your rights? Say, no, you signed for a rematch. Here's the contract. We're having it. It's not. It's like, oh well, we'd still take it. But where's Deontay Wilder? So, what on earth has happened to Deontay Wilder? Are you telling me you don't want to avenge this defeat? Are you telling me you don't want to be king again? You don't want to be champ? You're going to go out like that? But some people are made of different stuff. Right? And the people that I know, AJ, Dillian White, these people who suffered defeats, they want to come back, and they won't rest till they get revenge, or at least attempt revenge. I just can't understand. I don't know. And what's with the silence? I've got to say, right, the best thing that happened for AJ was Tyson Fury winning. Because I believe that in that team, Tyson Fury, MTK, Top Rank, Warren, John Fury, whoever else is in that team as well, they all want to fight AJ, right? They all believe they can beat AJ. The other mob, they never wanted it. And I can see it now. And it's only like, it was so frustrating at the period where they wouldn't even have a conversation about fighting Anthony Joshua, right? But this just goes to show me, like, and I believe that, you know, even if Wilder would have won, I don't even know if he would have got the AJ fight made. But I know we'll get the Fury fight made.
Well, if you want to wrap your mind around all of this and why it is that Deontay Wilder finds himself in this predicament, it's because he's a mismanaged fighter. And he was always a mismanaged fighter. For a long time, I talked about how, you know, Deontay Wilder seemed to fight exclusively on Showtime in the absence of an exclusivity deal.
Mismanaged.
You know, like the deal that Anthony Joshua has with Sky Sports over there in the United Kingdom. The kind of deal to where once the deal is over, you will have made a substantial amount of money. Deontay Wilder was fighting exclusively on Showtime. His handlers had him fighting exclusively on Showtime in the absence of that kind of a deal. And that is not to Deontay Wilder's benefit.
It wasn't.
Mismanaged fighter. You think about how before DAZN even offered him that $100 million, the Anthony Joshua people offered Deontay Wilder $15 million, guaranteed 35% of the upside, which turned into 40% of the upside, and that wasn't enough for his handlers to let him have the fight. Even
mismanaged.
Worse is that Deontay Wilder would have made more money fighting Dominic Breazeale on the DAZN platform than what he actually made for fighting Dominic Breazeale on Showtime. That's right. DAZN was ready to pay this guy $20 million to fight that same Dominic Breazeale, and reports indicated that while Showtime did provide him a care package for having rejected DAZN's offer, it wasn't to the tune of $20 million. Your negotiators negotiated for less money? Only so you can end up getting your ass kicked by Tyson Fury in the rematch for less money than what has been on the table for you to fight Anthony Joshua, whether it was at Wembley, in the United Kingdom, or here in the United States after DAZN offered him that $100 million. Deontay Wilder is a mismanaged fighter, and he always was. And that is why he finds himself in this predicament. I mean, how mismanaged a fighter does he have to be to where the term limit on the rematch clause that he has expires, and now Tyson Fury is in the clear to fight whoever the fuck he wants to fight? I mean, I don't understand. What the hell is going on here? Did you guys write this contract in crayon? I mean, I'm being honest. I've been watching this sport a very long time. And as far as rematch clauses go, I've never actually heard of a rematch clause expiring. And if it expired, it would have to be because Deontay Wilder's handlers did not protect themselves and protect the third fight in the fine print, i.e. the force majeure clause. The clause that would have provided some assurances that if unforeseen circumstances, an act of God, somehow delays the third fight, prevents it from happening in the allotted time frame, Tyson Fury would still legally be bound to oblige Wilder.
You guys didn't bother to put that into the contract?
He is a mismanaged fighter, and he always was. And this was indicative to me in the treatment that Wilder's handlers exhibited towards the Anthony Joshua fight. That was Wilder's white whale. That was his chance to ascend to the next stratosphere. And these guys were more focused on smoke and mirrors and giving off this image that Wilder is more popular or more of a draw than he actually is.
Idiots.
Attempting to disguise his market value in an attempt to out-negotiate Anthony Joshua and his team, and it didn't work out for the best because here we are. Wilder's been left high and dry, folks.
You think he's in a power position right now?
Wilder still has a lot of apologists out there who are trying to put their own little spin on this entire fiasco, but the fact of the matter is, there's no way that Tyson Fury gets out of this third fight. There's no way he gets out of this contractual obligation without legal ramifications unless there is no contractual obligation because the contract expired. If it expired, it's Wilder's team's fault. They let it happen because they didn't protect themselves in the fine print. Bumbling idiots in